Does it matter what kind of M.2 drive you add to your PlayStation 5 to have more room for games? I tested a Seagate, a Corsair, and a Samsung, and here's what I found. Any game console you buy now, it's basically not going to have enough storage for you to store all the games that you want. Even the PlayStation 5, you got a 800-something gigabyte internal hard drive. Then there's system files and stuff. After that, you've got a little bit less than 700 gigs of space. But that's still not enough for modern video games. Your average game is somewhere between 25 and 40 gigs. A lot of games are 80 gigs. Some are over 100 gigabytes in terms of their file size. That's how much space they're going to eat up on your hard drive. You know, casual games, indie games, those can be a lot smaller. But really, we're talking about the mainstream games that eat up a ton of space. You're not going to have room for more than a handful on your PlayStation 5. Now, what Sony did that was pretty clever here is they included an extra drive slot inside the PlayStation 5. You can pop open the cover of the system, and inside there's an empty slot that takes something called an M.2 drive. Anyway, you slot it in, screw down the little screws, reboot your PlayStation 5, recognizes it automatically, you set a couple of options about where you want new content to save to, and you're set. These M.2 drives can store PS4 and PS5 games, and more importantly, they can play PS4 and PS5 games. Before, if you plugged in an external hard drive, you could store everything, but you could only play PS4 games off that external drive. You had to transfer the games back to the internal storage to play PS5 games. So this way, we're able to greatly increase, sometimes triple or more, the internal storage capacity of our PS5. So does it matter which one you get? My team and I decided to try that out by taking 3 different M.2 drives, all specifically marketed as being really great for the PlayStation 5, and doing some data transfer tests using different games on them. So we tried the Seagate FireCuda 530, the Samsung 980 Pro, and the Corsair MP600 Pro LPX. These are all M.2 drives that have the heatsink built in. You can get them in different capacities from 1 terabyte to I think about 4 terabytes. And we each installed one of these drives, took a couple of games, and did some transfer tests using a stopwatch to time the speed. Now, what did we do? We took a medium-sized game and we took a fairly large-sized game. We took the game and we transferred it from the internal PlayStation 5 hard drive to the M.2 drive that was in the internal M.2 slot. So one transfer going that way. Then we transferred the game back to the original internal hard drive. We timed that. We did that with Spider-Man Miles Morales, and then we did that with Final Fantasy VII, the remake, the PlayStation 5 version of that. I'm gonna tell you, they all scored just about the same, literally within seconds of each other. That leads me to conclude that you can pretty much get any compatible M.2 drive, it's going to work fine. I wouldn't worry too much about getting one model versus the other, at least out of the 3 mainstream models that we tested. Going from the PlayStation 5 drive to the M.2 drive, the Corsair was the absolute fastest for Final Fantasy VII, but again, just by a handful of seconds, a minute 4 versus a minute 5 and a minute 8. For Spider-Man Miles Morales, again, everything was either 31 or 33 seconds. I'd call that functionally a complete tie. Going back the other way, once again, the Corsair was a tiny bit faster, literally just by seconds, going from that M.2 drive back to the internal PlayStation 5 drive on Final Fantasy VII, and it looks like it was basically tied with the Samsung on Spider-Man, and again, the Seagate was like 3 seconds slower, so functionally the same again. So I think it's safe to say if you find any of these PS5 compatible M.2 drives, especially if it's the handy versions with the heatsink built in, you can feel safe knowing that you're going to get excellent performance no matter which brand you choose. If you want to find out more about PlayStation 5 M.2 drives or anything else I've talked about, you can find links in the description below. I also feel safe saying that no matter what console you have, whether it's a PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X or S, Nintendo Switch, you are going to want to eventually add additional storage to it because frankly, given the size of games and the fact that almost all games are downloaded now rather than played off a disc or a card or anything physical like that, you're going to run out of space and none of these devices have enough internal storage built in. You can check our PlayStation 5 list of the best M.2 drives for your PS5 to see which drives are in stock, how much they cost, what capacities are available, and of course we'll also keep that article updated with all the testing data that we do on these drives and future drives that we test.